Hello and welcome to the Days of Learning Back to the Kitchen podcast. I am one of the hosts today, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Dr. Yvonne Greer. Yvonne, it's so good to see you again.
Yes, it is. And I'm just ecstatic about this particular program, as I am all the programs. So I'm glad we have this time together to just talk and chat and discuss and kind of learn together.
We were talking right before we went on that we've been doing this now for our third season, fifth season for the Days of Learning, but a third season for the Back to the Kitchen. I've just got to say, where does the time go? I just don't know.
I know, and we now have 11 different recipes that have been demonstrated. So um, really kind of getting excited. This year is just a little different because these are recipes from the Why Eat Right kitchen, my recipes that I've been developing. And so hopefully I can give you some good, refreshing recipes, nutritious, and as I always say, delicious.
Absolutely. And in our 3 years' time, we've had some fantastic community champions. And today is going to be no different with Vivian King and Lee Ellis on the show. And we'll introduce them in a little bit. But hey, Yvonne, guess what month it is?
It's several months, but the one I'm always promoting is National Nutrition Month.
Well, thank goodness you didn't have to remind me it's March, but March is National Nutrition Month. You know what? Why is that such an important day for us? Why is it important for you?
For me, is it as a nutrition professional, and this is considered to be National RD Day, it's a time for us to rededicate ourselves to the health and wellness and why we do what we do all year long. This year's theme is Fuel for the Future. And some of the work that I'm going to be doing is with pregnant moms. And then we've talked about the link between the past, the present, and the future. And so I really resonate with that particular theme. And we find that as dietitians, we never get bored, but sometimes we think, oh, it's a daunting task. But during National Nutrition Month, it's our time to just shine and just kind of rediscover all of the wealth and all of the positives of why nutrition is important.
Yeah, you mentioned the positives, which is, I think, is an important consideration. And when we talk about the inequities that exist in our community, we need to recognize those things that exist. But there's also so much beauty, joy, and assets in the community. Talk a little bit about it, because it's always a good reminder for me about your work with Novodan and your work with the Black Dietitians Society and why that's so important to community health and nutrition as it's National Nutrition Month.
Well, Novodan, the National Organization of Blacks in Dietetic and Nutrition, we are an organization that bond together to support each other and to support the new and future nutritional professionals that are coming up of color. And we have some unique challenges because of some of the I would say systemic racism that has interfered with us eating healthy foods. And that's where, when we start looking at some of the young dietitians coming up today, they are understanding that we have some reclaiming to do of our own cultural heritage and to really look at what are those benefits of soul food. Because when you graduate as a registered dietitian and you cannot talk on your own foods, you do not feel you've been educated properly. And so we're changing that narrative, and some of the words that I'll be going through is new words that the new dietitians of younger dietitians, African Americans, are coming up with to reclaim the heritage. One of our themes today is having healthy makeovers and honoring soul food and cultural traditions. Because one of the things that people many times do not know is that soul foods has its roots in African foods. And African foods had to be nutritious because it actually nourished those brilliant minds that made the pyramids and, did so much with health and wellness during ancient times that we lost over time and that we are now rediscovering. So that reclaiming, that rediscovering, that brings us to, some of the terms that we're going to be using today. And I want everyone to be on the same plane when we start talking about this, but it is really saying that we are elevating our health, our eating, and embracing the foods that nourished us, soul foods, the foods that nourished a weary soul after working from sunrise to sunset, food that was made with love, food that brought families together, food that has a context that mean a lot to a lot of people, yet some of the ingredients that they were made with weren't always the healthiest. And now we are now saying you can still have those foods. We just need to make over those foods. So I'll say the question of the day: what healthy soul food makeovers have you had lately?
That's a fantastic question. And I want to point out something in this idea of a discussion here. And we had a meeting recently for Milwaukee County Organizations Promoting Prevention, MCOP, as we like to call it, where we gather as a community to do this reclamation, this work of claiming what is ours that is good in the community. And when I came away from the meeting yesterday, I was enthused because there's so much good work going on that people are highlighting. And frankly, some of our evaluators are noticing. We've got evaluators from Boston and Oregon that is just noticing how close knit our community is, right, whether it be in having community baby showers or working on community garden like we're going to talk today, or other things. But it's so cool that we can highlight and talk about all of these wonderful blessings that we have in our community around health and wellness.
Yes, being part of what they call a 9-state learning collaborative has been very, very kind of eye-opening, because we sometimes take it for granted that we have these things in Milwaukee, community gardens and coalitions and this and that. And when we go to other places, they're saying, how did you do that? How did that get started? And so we are actually, sharing what we are doing with other communities. And then if we see something that resonates at the other communities, we are picking up those things as well. But again, sometimes we really don't know that we're kind of leading the country in some of the things that we're doing that we've had in our life for a long time.
Well, it's the idea of a relationship. We can have transactions, which we need to have, but at the same time, you and I have had a relationship for going on 20 years now, and I know that you've had longer that with other people, and getting to know the people of the community to say, how can you contribute to the well-being of our community, regardless of where you come from? But it helps us get to that next space.
Yes, yeah, and that's one of the reasons why when I started looking at the restorative justice model, which we've been using in different things. So we did our Milwaukee Social Determinants of Health Accelerator Action Plan, and we used the restorative justice model where we brought the community that has been harmed, was able to help them to tell their story, their truth, and to communicate with some systems partners who over time has agreed that many times the community has been harmed, but coming together and then trying to find solutions together so that everyone can thrive going forward. That whole process is so inspiring and uplifting. That is the same kind of thing that is going on when we start talking about reclaiming our food and food sovereignty. It's some of the same processes of understanding that there has been some harm in the way we have promoted nutrition, health, and wellness. And how can we move beyond there where we can empower people to have food sovereignty and to embrace the healthy foods in their culture and to actually be empowered to control the food that is that they have access to.
Yeah.
Those are new concepts, but those are concepts that people are embracing. And I'm so glad to have some of the people that are on today is because they are at the forefront of helping people to move to that next level, recapturing our gardening, our agriculture, our food supply, and then also recapturing what is healthy for the body. What should we be eating and how we should be eating it so we have longevity versus, you know, being born 10 years less life expectancy. Those are things that we can change, but it changes over time, and we are at the forefront of making those changes happen.
It reminds me that this is not a new journey, and it goes back for generations. But for those of us that are from the 50s and the 60s, it really was born out of the civil rights movement and the rights of all people. And when we think about this and some of these new terms, but we talk about the idea of health equity and the idea of how we might think about populations and groups, not only the distribution of resources, but where additional resources are often needed in those communities that have been disadvantaged, have been marginalized, and frankly, I will say, have been oppressed over time. And so there is freedom in knowing that we can have restorative justice, we can have food sovereignty, and that leads us towards health equity.
Yes. Yeah. And the idea that we need to put the resources where we need to improve so that everyone can thrive. So it doesn't mean that, you know, some communities aren't going to get any help whatsoever. But it does mean that we do need to start looking at where have the injustices been done and how can we alleviate those so that we build everyone up so that all are thriving. And that's, you know, that's a little bit different than sometimes people don't understand. Equal is not always equity. You give equal resources, but these people really need more, then you're not really solving the issue. And so that's where this is at. The other thing is nutrition justice. There is a movement that says that all people should be able to have nutritious, healthy food so they can live out what we call our American dream: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and to not have access to full service grocery stores in your neighborhood, to only be able to go to the very outskirts of town to get healthy, affordable food. Some are calling that food apartheid versus just food deserts, because if you go in the neighborhood, you might have convenience stores and fast food places. You may have some food, but it's not the healthy food that you need. So that is some of the things that they're saying, that we got to eliminate the food apartheid and make sure that in low-income neighborhoods, they have grocery stores, they have farmers markets, they have places where they can get good, nutritious food. So now they're calling that not just food security, but nutrition security, that now they have access to affordable, nutritious food. So those are, like I said, terms that a lot of times we are not as used to. And again, the food sovereignty is having control over the types of foods that are available in your neighborhood and in your home. Sometimes we don't realize is that because there's so many choices out here, everyone thinks, well, they allow it to be sold, it must be okay. No, you know, and a lot of times the stores that's in the neighborhood, you're not controlling the food, they're controlling the food. And so you eating what's available, but that's not food sovereignty. Food sovereignty, it says taking back control of the foods that you have access to and the foods that are present in your neighborhood. I'll just give one example is that it was several years ago, and it was a classic example of taking back over in the not the King Drive, but the North Avenue, like 17th and North. They wanted to bring in another fried chicken place. The community gathered together and said, no, We don't want any more fried chicken place. We want a grocery store. And they were able to bring in a grocery store in that area. And that was the community standing up and having food sovereignty for what they wanted as far as the type of healthy food that they wanted. They did the same thing when they brought Pete's Market in instead of just having a dollar store. So those are the types of things. And as we see the community gardens and people embracing healthy foods, those are the type of things we talk about by using that food sovereignty to promote health equity and also restorative justice to make sure our communities have healthy food in them.
Really great.
Really great.
And the idea that we have to recognize that many of our children and many of our seniors don't have enough food in the neighborhood. They don't have that nutrition security. And I was reading an article this morning that's happening in Oakland, where the courts have ruled that housing is not in the Constitution, so it is not a constitutional right. And so if housing is not a constitutional right, food is also not a constitutional right. And so we need to take it on ourselves to support the security of the communities, because we know 20% of our children go to bed hungry at night. Yeah. And as you said, there's not enough of the right kinds of foods today. And I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing, that Vivian Kingdon and Lee Ellis are doing in the neighborhoods to make sure that we have enough of the right kinds of and cultural foods. And I want to end by saying thank you, Yvonne, for bringing up these definitions and bringing up the idea of sovereignty and choices, which is really what we all want at the end of the day is to have some sort of choice in our life.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this. We're going to go to the video. Yvonne, set us up. What are we going to see today in your kitchen? Back to the kitchen.
Well, we are going to be seeing one of my favorite recipes, and it is the sweet potatoes with orange. It's a way that, again, in African traditions, we didn't have recipes, so it was passed down from my mother to me, and I'm passed it down to my daughter. And so for us, it's just our regular recipe, but it's a way to make sweet potatoes like a makeover that is like candy jam, but with way less sugar. And so I wanted to just present that to the group and to show that you can take any recipe that you really like at home and find ways to make over those recipes with healthier ingredients and still have the nutrition. Sweet potatoes is so high in beta carotene, so that it's very, very healthy for you.
Fantastic. So we're going to watch the video and then we're going to introduce our community champions. Kelsey, would you mind rolling the video, please?
Good afternoon and welcome back to the kitchen, season 3. I'm Dr. Yvonne Greer, registered dietitian and owner of Why Eat Right, nutritional consultant and healthy living coach. This program is being brought to you by MCOP, the Milwaukee County Organization Promoting Prevention and the Medical College of Wisconsin, in partnership with the State of Wisconsin's Chronic Disease Prevention Program with funding through the CDC 1815 grant. This session is devoted to honoring traditional soul foods while showcasing how recipe makeovers can improve their nutritional profile while preserving their cultural appeal. So let's get started. Our recipe for today is sweet potato with orange. The recipe is a makeover of the traditional candied yams that is a staple in the African American soul food diet. The recipe calls for sweet potatoes, orange juice, cinnamon, an optional nutmeg, vanilla, small amount of cane sugar, and olive oil. We'll first get started with our sweet potatoes. First, you have to wash and peel them. I've already washed the sweet potato. You don't want to do a lot at one time because it is easy to cut yourself. So you do small amounts, kind of in a circular motion, so that you get all of your peel off. Again, it's tough, so you want to take your time. Now we're ready to cut them into chunks. I'm going to put the paring knife down and pick up my larger kitchen knife. We use a sawing motion, and you go across, you don't go straight across, you kind of go in triangles, and it makes it so much easier to get through. Wherever you see a point at, that's a good place to cut. And there you have your pieces of sweet potato. Only 2 sweet potatoes are needed. One thing, now you have a whole pot full of sweet potatoes with just 2 sweet potatoes. To this amount, we are now going to add our additional ingredients. We can start with our 1/2 cup of orange juice, a cup of water. Now, one thing about this, it depends on how big your sweet potatoes is. You may have to add more water to make sure that the water comes all the way to the top. And then we're going to add to it our cinnamon, 1 teaspoon, only a 1/2 teaspoon of your nutmeg. For your vanilla, you would just need 1 teaspoon, 1/3 of a cup of sugar. And last, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Now you just need to stir well. And then you're going to take it to the stove and cook on high heat to bring it to a boil. See there? Now that it has come to a rolling boil, I'm going to stir it once. And I'm going to put the lid on it and reduce the heat down. Just going to look, just make sure there's still bubbles, but it's not cooking as intensely. We're going to let this cook now for 20 minutes. So while this is cooking, let's hear some key nutritional facts about the African American soul food diet. African American soul foods. The foods that nourish the body. Foods are the traditional African American foods that have been passed down through the generations without recipes, which involve stewing fresh vegetables and meats with various seasonings and often pork fat. We now understand that changing the types of fats that are used and making lower sodium dishes with the use of herbs and spices are key to enhancing our health and longevity while maintaining our cultural heritage. African Americans on average eat more cooked leafy vegetables such as collard greens, mustard, and turnips than other Americans, and more legumes like black-eyed peas, limas, red beans, and pinto beans. Deep orange vegetables like sweet potatoes, winter squash, and carrots also are frequently consumed. By starting Nutritional Counseling with these healthy food practices and utilizing tools like the Tips for a Healthier Soul Food Plate, patterned after the Choose My Plate, or the Old Ways Health Through Heritage, African Heritage Diet Pyramid, African American can be inspired to take pride in achieving a healthier way of eating that uniquely reflects the wisdom and tradition of our ancestors. Some nutritional benefits of soul foods include 1 cup of collard greens has 350 milligrams of calcium, as much as a cup of milk. Sweet potatoes is high in beta carotene, the same as carrots. Black-eyed peas has the highest level of soluble fiber, which is great for lowering cholesterol, similar to oatmeal. Catfish is high in omega-3 oils, similar to salmon. Watermelon is high in lycopene, similar to cooked tomatoes. Green and red cabbage is known to lower cancer risk, similar to broccoli. Adjustments to cooking styles of these cultural foods are needed to maintain their health benefits. The African American Heritage Diet depicts a wide version of collage of African heritage foods, inspiring individuals and communities to reclaim their best health. The chronic conditions prevalent today, such as diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and obesity, were less likely to be seen in Africa with consumption of the typical plant-based diets of earlier times. Scientific studies have shown that the risk of chronic disease dramatically increases the more meat-based diets are consumed with low fruits and vegetables. Overall, the African Heritage Diet Pyramid is based on scientific research that shows that, like ancestors, we can lower our risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and stroke, avoid or treat diabetes, fight cancers and many chronic diseases, reduce asthma, glaucoma, and kidney disease, nurture healthier babies, achieve a healthier weight, and avoid obesity, and reduce depression. Eating patterns that lower processed sugar, unhealthy types of fat, and sodium, and include only small amounts of meat are recommended. Collard greens and dried beans are good sources of calcium as well as other nutrients and are important in the African American soul food diet. Now let's get back to our recipe. Now for the finished product. Juice. Wow, what a nutritious and delicious treat. Now let's join our invited community champions for a discussion.
Fantastic, Yvonne. What another wonderful show today. And I just got to say, I'll just have you say a few comments, but I was counting, I lost count after a while, but you had every color of the rainbow in that video when we talk about the rainbow of fruits and vegetables, and really well done. And I love the historical and the cultural aspects of it.
Yes, I'm telling you. I always leave it up to Richard to take us to another level of creativity. And so he says, don't worry about it. I'll bring it in. And he does a great job. I want to say that, you know, discovering that collard greens was like eating a glass of milk. You know, when you discover that those foods in their basic level are loaded with nutrition. It does make me, you know, feel proud that at least we don't feel like we have to give up our foods in order to be healthy. We just have to learn a little more about how to cook them.
What a wonderful show, and we look forward. Thank you, Richard, for that. So let's bring our community champions to play, and this is, I've been really excited about having Lee Ellis and Vivian King on the show today. Let me tell you a little about Mr. Ellis. Lee Ellis, born August 13th, 1960, a native Milwaukeean. He is the present founder and executive director of the Lee Ellis and Company Incorporated community garden featuring CAGE, Community Agricultural Growing Experiences, also referred to as the CAGE campus. The CAGE is an urban growing and gardening hub where students and community members can come and learn gardening while working in community gardening development programs. The founder and former executive of the We Got This garden program. Mr. Ellis has received national acclaim for his ability to change the lives of young Black men using agriculture as a tool in the Milwaukee inner city. He was featured in the Steve Harvey Show and the national podcast, The Karen Hunter Show on Sirius Radio. Most recently, the TMJ4 Positively Milwaukee Unsung Hero and Most Inspiring Person of the Year Award for 2022. And I saw that one, Mr. Ellis, and I saw you on the show that day. Mr. Ellis is also the founder of the Lee Ellis and Theater Group, a nonprofit organization 28 years young. Mr. Ellis, more than 35 years in American theater community as a writer, actor, director, and producer of many years presenting in Milwaukee. Mr. Ellis is married 15 years to Angela. Together they have 5 children and 23 grandchildren. Mr. L is committed to helping to build stronger communities in Milwaukee. It is his main goal to grow good quality food that all people can come and get for free. He works tirelessly in Milwaukee, advocating for families in the city. He strongly believes as long as resources are short in the home and people leave home hungry and angry and they have a gun, they may shoot the next person that makes them angry. And I love this personal statement. As long as they have their hands in the soil, they keep them off the trigger of a gun. Welcome, Lee Ellis.
Wow,
Yes.
that was long. How are you, David? Hey, Dr. Greer. It's an honor to call you that.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Vivian.
Hey, Andre, how are you?
Oh, cool.
And I'm going to.
And I moved here.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to then introduce Vivian King. It's definitely a pleasure. Vivian King is communication advisor for University of Wisconsin-Madison All of Us research program at the Center for Community Engagement and Health Partnerships. She is also an award-winning author, speaker, communications consultant, and connector who founded Vivian L. King Connections after writing When the Words Suddenly Stop, Finding My Voice Again After a Massive Stroke. The book was an Amazon bestseller after Vivian appeared on Good Morning America. It received a 2021 Outstanding Book Award from the National Association of Black Journalists, first in health and wellness at the 2021 Author Elite Awards, and a first 2 seconds and 3rd place medals in the 2022 Book Fest Awards, including for the production and narrative of her audiobook. Vivian has served as the executive in the healthcare and grocery industry, where she was director of public relations for Roundy Supermarkets and vice president of community affairs for Aurora Health Care. During her award-winning broadcast career, she worked at television stations in Louisiana, Texas, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Her latest TV assignment brought her to Milwaukee, where she worked for 10 and a half years at WTMJ's TV as an anchor reporter, even creating her own daily lifestyle segment, Viv's View. A native of St. Louis, Vivian received her journalism degree from the University of Missouri, Columbia, where she was named a distinguished alumna. She is a lifetime member of Delta Sigma Phi Sorority Incorporated and became part of the first Black homecoming couple on her campus after letting her sorors members talk her into running. I just want to say it is such a pleasure. And I've been a fan for the whole 10 and a half years you was on Channel 4. So welcome,
you.
welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's really get after this because I think that you both have stories to tell and wisdom to share from your time in community. And thank you both for all that you do for and with the community. Andre, I want to start with you. Just tell us about the cage and your journey in getting to that space.
Okay, the cage came as a result of the fire chief, Aaron Lipsky, at a community event at Northcott Neighborhood House, seeing me there and asking me to meet him the next day on 13th and Reservoir. We're located at 1313 West Reservoir Avenue, right next to Firehouse 5. And he asked me to meet him on the grounds, and we walked inside that fence, and I immediately felt the same connection as I did on 9th and Ringwood. We got this. And he said, well, what would you turn this into? I said, of course, I could see it as a garden. I said, but I want it to be something greater than a garden. I would call it a campus. And I said this immediately, Vivian, Dr. Greer, and David. I said, and since it has a fence around it, let's call it a cage because it would be separate from what's happening in the community, and people could come inside the cage and get the healing elements that would mean it. I said, but I got to come up with an acronym for cage. And so I stood right there, and God is so good to give me this gift that I said, okay, community, agricultural growing experiences.
Wonderful.
And we both got excited, and it stayed. So Cage is a campus. We have a lot of silos operating with gardens, but it needs to be more connected, and people need to know where to go. Of course, we have Groundworks, and I could spend my time telling you about all the wonderful organizations, and especially what Venus Williams is doing with Alice's Garden. And
Yeah.
if I name one, I got to name 30. And we should be proud that Milwaukee is one of the capitals for urban gardens and communities in the country, in the world. We have
and I do want to say that is one thing that I found out when I went nationally, that we are revered like that. And like I said, that's why I said sometimes we take it for granted, but we are known all over the country for our community gardens.
And not only that, for the people that have been growing actively in their backyards or on their front porches for years, great grandmother, third and fourth generations of growing have been happening in houses that are 50 and 60, 70 years owned by families, David. And I'm excited to be a part of that. But even greater than that, when I found that when you all talked about restorative justice earlier, we're using that in the garden. We're taking young Black boys and men. I've got men that have been in jail for 20 and 30 years that come home and they heard about the work I was doing or we were doing in the garden, and they come to the garden, to the cage now, and that's the first place where they want to start and getting acclimated back into the community. They want to come and do good where they messed up. And I want to just correct something about the government and all of what you were talking about with the constitutional right. It's not a constitutional right, it's a human right. And that's
definitely a human right.
And that's how we need to look at it. And nor do we need necessarily, this is my opinion. We don't need laws passed to grow good food and share with the neighbors and share with the people that need it. We can just do that. They don't know. Right. They don't know when we're eating. They don't know that you was gonna do sweet potatoes today.
And you are so right. And I hope you know I had on my paper human right, but that human right, in order for us to really achieve what they say, we need to be able to have healthy food and not just processed, but definitely. And I wanted to make sure, Vivian, when I started thinking about some of your journey and how you have, I didn't even know about all of your bio. Your bio is crazy impressive. But could you just tell a little bit about your journey to being a health and wellness advocate? Because that's the way I look at you now, as a health and wellness advocate.
And I guess, I became a health and wellness advocate because I had a major health scare in my life. And in 2013, so it'll be 10 years come October.
Okay.
In 2013, I was going to a Girl Scouts breakfast, and I got there and collapsed. I went to the hospital, was rushed to the hospital, found out that I had a stroke. And I was in the hospital for 32 days, in neurological ICU
Wow.
for 10 days, and in the hospital for 32 days. And I don't have high blood pressure. I don't have history of stroke in my family. I have been active. I'm relatively active. I'm not like a gym fanatic, but I exercise and I get out and about. Doctors said birth control pills over the age of 40 is what caused the stroke, caused the blood clot in my brain. And it was over the left side of my brain, over the part that manages your speech. And that's why the book is called When the Words Suddenly Stopped, Finding My Voice Again After a Massive Stroke, because I literally couldn't talk for 3.5 weeks. But what I found out, doctor said, because I was active, because I ate relatively well, that's one reason. And of course I got immediate attention, but that's one reason that I was able to have a good prognosis, and I was able to return to me as my friends and family all knew me. And so that's when I said, you know what, I really, they tell you when you're young in school, you are what you eat. I didn't really embrace that until I realized, you know what, the fact that I was eating relatively well and staying active is what made my body resilient enough to come back from that stroke. And so that's why I really looked at, what am I eating? When I go to my doctor, my annual physical, I found out I know what my numbers are.
Yeah.
And so when they go up and down, I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And so one time my glucose was up. And so my doctor said, you need to drop sugar. Now I drink tea every day. I love tea, hot tea, love tea. And so I said, okay, I put sweetener, I put sugar, or, sugar in the raw, or honey. I always did that. And so now I'm like, nope, taking that out of my diet, because that's something I could immediately change. I went back to the doctor and after 3 months, and I had lost 12 pounds. And so I kept doing that because, I could control what goes into my body. You talk about fresh vegetables. My mom now lives with me. She moved after 86 years. She moved from St. Louis, Missouri to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So she's living with me now. And when we go grocery shopping, I'm like, she's used to getting, she'll get frozen vegetables, and, they're fine, right? But I'm like, no, let's get fresh vegetables and stir fry them, and, whatever the case. And so
that's one of the things that I'm insisting on. One of the programs I'm working in, who we're going to be giving nurturing food boxes to new pregnant women, new families, to support them. And in the food boxes, one of the people said, "Oh, we just bought a whole lot of canned greens," and I said, "Oh no, we're having fresh greens and fresh foods, and people are going to learn skills at cooking." Because like when you said that bag of vegetables, I know people who they have never seen a fresh piece of broccoli. They have never, but they eat broccoli because they get it in the steam bags and put it in the microwave and they steam it, and they never have cooked it from scratch. So when they get their farmers market checks, you know what they do? They give them away. They say they don't know how to shop at the farmer's market. They don't know what to do with those fresh vegetables. So reclaiming those skills and making sure that they know how to cook and how to shop and what to do with them. Those are value added skills that can be passed down from, parent and mother to daughter. But I have one group, Youth Take Charge. The youth was leading the family. The youth was leading individuals to eat healthier. So that's where Andre, every time when I see those young men in the gardens and how they're embracing healthy food, but you also have a way that you teach them how to use that nutrition, that health, that to embrace their whole lives.
Yeah, I do. And and it starts here when you have your hands in the soil and you have to wipe the sweat from your brow because you've been working so hard. I can talk to you about Africa, and I can talk to you about the slavery days, and I can talk to you about the old days when we toiled from sun up to sundown and didn't have a choice to be out there. And then when I tell them to look up and they see the ray of the sun, and I ask them, what do they see? One of the first things they say is, I see God. And then I say, do you see God in yourself? Well, God is in the soil. We don't call it dirt. Dirt is what you can walk on the bottom of your shoes. Soil goes in your belly. The great Will Allen taught me that. And and their minds are changed. Their minds are changed. You know, mustard seed faith is talked about in the Bible. And I'm sorry, if you talk to me, God gonna come up. Okay.
That's okay.
Mustard seed faith is important because you take one seed. See, a lot of people planting at home, they'll take the whole bag of seeds and put it in one spot, and then they wonder why their plants grow kind of wrong or not grow at all. You take one or two seeds and put it in a spot, and it can produce enough food to feed a number of people. And when those young men see that, then I can tell them that's how babies are born. That's how you got here. Somebody planted a seed, somebody took care of themselves, and then you were born. You take care of that seed the same way, then they go take care of their cars the same way, and they don't want to drive them so fast or have so many people in there doing the wrong things. Then they go take care of their homes the same way, and we have to keep the garden clean, and they keep the garden clean. And so it's discipline, and then it's a whole lot of awareness. Here's the other thing real quick. I heard somebody get ready to say something, is that literacy is in that, because those that can't read or write, I can take the one word potato and have them practice that. And then I can teach them tomato. And now I have practiced that, and you put it together and you got potato, tomato, until we get a sentence, and then we add is and that and those and thus and God to it. Now they're reading.
Okay.
It's an amazing thing about how these pieces are connected. And Vivian, I want to ask you, because after you had your stroke, I talk for a living, and I can't imagine what it must have been like for you to communicate other than speaking. Can you speak into that a little bit, please?
I can. And Andre brought up God, and I really think it was God because God speaks to me. He has a slow reveal for me, right? And he protects me. And so I did not realize while I was in the hospital that I used to be a broadcaster. That had not even, I had not even thought about that. And so I just knew I was in the hospital. My mom, my friends were taking good care of me. Of course, the doctors and nurses and therapists were taking good care of me. And I just was content as I got better. I didn't even know in the beginning that I had a stroke. And I just knew I was in the hospital. People were being nice to me, telling me to do things and saying I needed to get better. And so it really wasn't until, I guess, about a week before I was released, which I was released a lot earlier than they originally predicted. It wasn't until then that I, started to know, okay, I did used to, I started to remember I used to be a broadcaster. I was then doing, I was community relations. And so, I think when because I've written a book and I've looked back at this in so many different directions and talked to different people, I really think that, God was slowing me down. You don't want to have him slow you down, right? Because it could be something drastic like this. I don't recommend that for anybody, right? Listen to him, be obedient. And I think he just wanted my body and my brain to heal and me to sit down and reflect on what I was doing in my life, how I was serving him, and how I could be a better person. So he took that memory away from me. And so everybody always asks the same question. You must have felt horrible because you couldn't speak, because you used to do that for a living. And that wasn't even a thought as I was healing.
Well, you found another voice, and I think that's a nice way to frame it, and a way to you remembered. And Andre, when you talk about remembering, and you talk about these young men that you intersect with, it just seems like so many times the young men and even the young women in the community don't have a lot of people to care for them. What's it like for someone coming out of incarceration and having someone to sit with them and say, you know what, you're not alone, and that when you bring them to the cage for that soil therapy, as I like to call it, and what's that like for them in that space?
Well, let's call it pops therapy, because that's what many of them refer to me as, pops, old and young. When you have 100 young black boys, 12 to 16 years old, in a garden who got there by 8 o'clock because they can't be on time because they're not allowed to work if they're 1 second late. When I close the fence, you got to go back to wherever you came from before you was late, and you got to be on time the next time you're allowed in the fence, because that's important, being where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be, and being accountable. But what it's like is when you have 100 of them and you ask the question, how many of you know your dad? And 90, how many of you don't know your dad? And 90 of them raise their hand. And you say, well, how many of you know your dad but still don't have a relationship? And another 5 raise their hand. Out of 100, only 5 knew their dad and possibly have a relationship. And you say to them, well, I'm not your birth dad, I'm the earth dad, and you can call me Pops. And some of them have never had a chance to call a man Pops. Just like when I need their attention, David, I put my hand on their shoulders and I say one thing. You remember when I said they look up at the sun and they see God? I call them son, S-O-N, and they see God another time. And many of them get emotional because, and I say, why? And it's grown men that are tough. Some have shot guns, some have shot people before. And I say, why do you get emotional? They said, because I never heard that, and I didn't even know how to receive that. And then when I say, I love you, and I look them straight in the eyes, they got to make sure that I'm genuine about that. And I don't mean anything of it, because little black boys in the hood, and black men, especially in the hood, have to go through a whole lot that we don't talk about or put out there. We show in the news often the bad or naughty things that they do, but we don't often get to see them in the vast amount of greatness that they are. Restorative justice is real. Once they go to jail and spend some time there, when they come home, they don't want to go back, but you got to have something for them to do.
Yeah. Yvonne, let's talk about the idea of what these individuals as champions, how that connects to the greater community. It really speaks to the idea of food as a connecting point within the community with what Andre and Vivian are saying. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, David always knows, but every time I start hearing all of those connections, those social connections, it brings me back to what I did my total doctoral research on, is social capital and the importance of the connections that we have and how that makes a total difference in the lives of people. That when you're socially isolated, it's almost as bad for you as smoking cigarettes or, having a fatal disease when you're not socially connected. And so, it's been looked at a lot, but they even looked at something like the WIC program that gives out, nutritious foods and give out formula and breastfeeding education, and they say, okay, is it the food that's given out that's actually creating the positive outcomes, or is it that connection, that individual knowing that they have to come back over and over again to see the nutritionist, to have someone who's caring about if their baby's growing or not, and can show them as they change the way they do things on how healthy it's making their children. So is it that food, or is it that connection? And that's how food can be such a connection. I know that Venus Williams, who we've had on the show, calls her place of business the table. And many times even her ministry is called the table, because being around the table, sharing and breaking bread together is so powerful, more so than we ever know, on how it motivates and it feeds that need for that baby sense of belonging and that feeds that need to say, I'm accepted for my authentic self. And two groups of researchers, and one is called McKinnon and the other one is Dunn. I mean, I use them all the time in my papers. What they really resonated, they say you have to, in order for you to get effective instructional change, or being able to react to education, you need to deal with the emotion and the social. The emotional and the social before instructional learning can take place. You can fill out a whole lot of education, all that, but if that person's emotion and their social connections is not there, it's very hard for them to learn.
It's correct.
And yeah, and that's that's why I said, when I see what's happening in the gardens, when I see what's happening in some of the places, even Vivian did programs that bring people together, and it's like that connection and that bonding seems to make a big difference on people going to that next level, what they call self-efficacy, being able to then take what's learned and go to that next level and lead their own life, versus feeling like they're just, a product or being controlled by something. Now they're taking control.
Exactly. Are we allowed to chime in?
Oh, yes, chime in.
Because oftentimes in our neighborhoods, parents whoop children with hands or weapons and things like that, and that make them go out into the community and behave accordingly. Whereas I stuff a fresh cucumber from the ground in their mouth when they acting up, and when those juices flow and they taste how authentic it is, they then say, their friends say, "Oh, you eating that?" He said, "Man, this is good, taste it." And then his friend tries it, and then that's something good that they have in common, and they come back to the garden the next day together for the cucumber and not bullets to go and shoot anybody with. And so I have their attention right there. So over a fresh salad, I can talk to them about their behavior. I can say, pull out your homework and let me see where you struggle. And when they say to me, "Mr. Andre, I can't read," as an advocate, I can call their teacher in school. "Well, did you know why so-and-so isn't doing their homework? They can't read." And so I go into the schools and I go into the court systems. Yvonne, if I can, right real quick, just let you know that right now, working with restorative justice and through the garden work and how it has helped, I'm working with Judge Rayna Morales and Judge Katie Cable and some of the others in the juvenile justice system, and we're introducing what is called the new folder concept, because a lot of our boys and men are being prosecuted on the old laws. Some haven't been changed since slavery, and so when they're getting sentenced, judges and stuff have to do it according to those laws, even if the crime doesn't fit the punishment. And so what I say before sentencing, charge them to the garden for 90 days with me or 120 days with me, and let me bring their new folder back. And when we come back with the new folder, they can read. They're in school. They have driver's licenses. They have a job. They've changed their life. They got on a suit and a tie. They got a haircut. They don't even look like the same person. And then when they address the judge, it isn't because in the garden you can't say
Right.
You can't speak to, you say, I stop talking to you or walk away from you, and then they say, "Mr. Andre," I say, "Okay, there we go. Let's get back to talking, but don't say, And so when we do that, you're restoring them back to their original neighborhood, their culture. You put them good old sweet potatoes on the screen. Somebody might have been paging through here and they didn't know you, but they saw them sweet potatoes looking good like that.
Right.
And they said, let me stop and look at that and see just what it does. Good food promotes good mental healing. When we can heal the mind, we can heal the body and the soul. So if it comes from God's great earth, it's good.
And that's one of the things when you were talking, is that they've got research that says, as your peers eat, so do you. As your peers eat healthier, you will eat healthier too. And when I start looking at the research, it said that unhealthy eating and food insecurity can be recycled from generation to generation. But the flip side is, once you develop a culture of health. And that culture of health can be recycled from one generation to the next. Now you're seeing longevity. Now you're seeing health and wellness being passed on. And I bring that up because I think about that All of Us program. That All of Us program that's trying to discover, some of the things that's unique in our own culture. And so, Vivian, I'm gonna have to bring you in on that because, we many times don't know a lot. And the only reason why I'm bringing this in, when I was doing my research, there was not enough data on
Right.
African Americans in Madison for me to even run my data on African Americans in Madison. We're not even in the research. So that's where All of Us comes in. So if you can speak a little bit on that.
Absolutely. All of us is trying to build the largest and most diverse database of its kind for health research, because as you all know, African Americans suffer from high blood pressure at a disproportionate amount. Fortunately, I didn't have high blood pressure, but too many of my brothers and sisters do in our culture. And the blood pressure medication was really tested on 40-year-old white males. And how does that really impact men of color, women of color? You don't know exactly. And so that's the best that they can do. And so we say, we need to be at the table so that we're not on the menu, right?
Right.
And so if we're at the table, we can be a part of research. We can make sure that we know how these medications impact our bodies. And so we try to tell people, we may not have, the cure for something in your lifetime, but this is the way you can give back to the community and for generations to come, because you are making sure that we know how this impacts your culture in the future and generations to come. So, we don't force people, of course.
Right.
People can ask the questions. We talk to people all the time. They can go on the website, joinallofus.org. They can go on our website. They can call us. And so they can learn. We'll talk to them as much as they need to.
And then I know that one aspect that I like is that you can get your health. Yes, that
Return of results. And so because when you become a participant, we do take your blood, we take your measurements, and so we can send that out. It's de-identified. They're not going to know it's you. One is sent to one place, another is sent to another place. We have saliva, we have your urine tests, and so they're all sent different places and de-identified. But with All of Us, you are taking surveys, because what we all realize is that your health is not just what happens at the doctor. Your health is impacted by, of course, what you eat, but where you live, what's in your environment. Are you breathing, are you next to a factory and you're breathing the output of the factory? And how are you living? Are you exercising? Are you doing any kind of exercise? And so all of those things fit into and play into how your health is at this time. And so that's why if you become a participant with All of Us, you're asked to do surveys. You don't have to, but you're asked to do surveys. You're asked to, when you join, you're asked to give your blood, your urine, and we take your measurements. And so we keep up with you, and you can keep up with us at your leisure. It takes some time to get to join. It takes a few hours up top. But the benefit is so much, it's so rewarding.
And one thing I will say with our people, many times we do not talk about health. We do not talk about our health. We don't share what went on in the family. And at times, because we don't talk about it, when something comes up, it's almost like, oh, I didn't never know. And then someone will say, oh, Aunt Mary had that. And this, someone else had that. And we are not even being proactive about our health because we don't talk about it. So this is a way that as you start looking at what's in your life, what's in your DNA, then you would be able to share with others. The food that you eat can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I want to make a couple of points here, just because I think it's just important. Going back to these idea of what you're all saying, this idea of these are points of connection. You will rarely hear me say but, you'll hear me say and a lot. And I'm going to do an and here. Emotional and social, physical and mental, genetics and where you live. And I want to throw this out to all three of you, this idea of culture being a part of that. And we ought to celebrate all culture, but I think the idea that Black culture is one that has been oppressed as well. But talk about the celebration of Black culture and African culture in each of your work, because I think it goes with that idea of celebrating and being and honoring it. Andre, can I just start with you in that space, because your work with young men?
I'd rather be nothing other than a Black man. I'm a king. I'm a king, and I'm a boss too. And I teach young Black boys that. And when they see that I'm 62 and not 63, they find that they too can go past 25. And it's uncommon culturally for young Black boys in today's age and culture. They think they can't live past age 25, and the legacy is to have their picture on a T-shirt. But they see me on a mural. They see me getting rewards, and after they see me on this podcast, guess where I'm going, David? To the hood, where my boys are, so that they know too that somebody is representing them. Next week on March 15th, I fly to Los Angeles, and I'm the guest speaker at the International Agricultural Journalists. They having a conference out there, and I'm the person that the Journal Sentinel, James Causey, has decided to take to make the expression of what can happen in the hood and how you can put the neighbor back into the hood when you use agriculture as the tool. So there is some cultural significance to it, and there's cultural significance to the food. Soul food don't belong to Russians or white folks or German, although they're privy to eating it and trying it. And most of y'all that do get that fried chicken, y'all come all the way to the hood for some fried chicken, and we'll make it for you. But I know how to fry you or something like a fried chicken that doesn't have all of those other things. And instead of teaching young boys that it's only one way to make soul food, we do it like Yvonne did, and how you can take the things out, because sometimes we don't discuss the DNA and what's good, what food you're allergic to, what foods you should or should not be eating. Sometimes I don't like certain things at certain times of the day. I want breakfast at night, and I wonder if that comes from some DNA, something. So I think culture is a very important part of it.
Vivian, what is your reaction to what Andre is saying there? I know it resonates.
So many things. When we first came on, you complimented me on my necklace. And so this was made for me in Kenya by a Maasai warrior. And I was in Kenya and Tanzania in October, and I love to travel, and I've been to Ghana, I've been to South Africa, I've been to Morocco. And so, but the thing is, they are making things, they are eating things, from the trees, right? So we went to a spice farm, and after we toured the spice farm and saw all the kind of spices, so many, we sat down and they pulled this mango from the tree when I was in Tanzania and gave me that mango. And I tell you, that is the best mango I have ever had in my life. Straight from the tree. I came home and bought a mango at the grocery store, and I was like, it is not the same. And so growing your own food is so just, it's spiritual. I think it is spiritual. And we're talking about culture. My dad, may he rest in peace, died at the age of 84, but still that's longer than a lot of people, right? His mother died at 103. And she used to make, fried chicken, hot water cornbread, greens, and all these years, she would use, of course, the bad stuff. She would use the ham hocks and salt pork. And now, and I don't eat it all the time. And sometimes I have made it like that, but I have since made it with turkey tails. And so, it's a slightly different taste, but it's still a good taste, and it's healthier. And so I think if we just kind of, know that, like for Andre, telling those young men, you should be living past 25, right? That you should be. There's no reason why you can't. And if those are some things that are in our control: what we eat, what we do, how we act. Anything can happen to us. But if we can have some longevity, we have the choice of what to put in our mouths, how we're going to act, if we're going to exercise. And because I had done those things at least a little bit more than, just every once in a while, that's why my prognosis when I had a stroke was much better than everybody expected. Because even in the beginning, the doctors were telling my care circle, you may have to get used to a new normal for Vivian, but they were like, nope, we're gonna pray her out of that. Nope, we're not, we're gonna have positive thinking. And all of that kind of fits together. And I want to say one more thing about the connections that Andre makes, because he has those young men, but he would tell us on Facebook, come to the garden, donate $20 so I can pay these young men. He got the community involved and invested in making sure these young men got the messages that they needed from that garden. And having been to the garden and seeing them work, it's just wonderful to see, wonderful to see.
I love that thought about control, longevity, choice, and connections. Yvonne, talk about culture and the idea of food in this space, what they're saying.
Well, I think that, sometimes we don't talk about it outside of our own culture, but the idea of standing on the shoulder of our ancestors and the ancestors that we take with us all the time. Sometimes people don't see the little cultural connections that I do almost every time I'm there. I'm going to have on some shells. I'm going to have on something that I bring my ancestors in the room to walk with me, to nourish me. And then the ideas of the wisdom that has been passed on, even though our ancestors might have gone a long time ago. People will always hear me say that my dad told me to dream big. If you dream big, you accomplish great things. If you dream small, you never accomplish nothing. I carry him with me at all time. My great grandmother's words and deeds, stay with me, my grandfather, so the lineage that we have goes with us. And so because of that rich cultural connections that we have, we are connected to our food, which nourished us, which sustained us, which brought us where we are today. And even though some had the salt pork and things like that, we still had people living long and healthy lives. And so they may have had diabetes or some other kind of ailment, but the nutrients that they were getting from that food did sustain them. And so, we have much less, work than we used to. Even though we go to work, we do this, we're still sitting more, we're at the computers more, we're doing less actual physical activity. They used to even say women used to clean their house top to bottom, get on the floor and scrub the floor. The physical activity from just living was more. And so now we need to really look at how are we living? How are we embracing our health in a different way? But our cultural roots and our cultural heritage is there. And when people try to come in or discount it, that's when you lose people. That's when they don't even listen. And then people say, oh, they don't want to take care of their health. The reason why I wanted to have community champions to come on is to make sure that the greater community knows that we have champions, we have health promoters, we have, yogis, we have all sorts of health and wellness people, we have seniors and elders, and we have that cultural connection. However, there is always room for improvement, but we don't have to think of ourselves as less than. And some of our younger people have thought of themselves as less than because of not having that positive role model that Andre and Vivian, you have a lot to do with too, because people do remember you, and you probably don't know how these people remember me. They remember you.
Yvonne, Vivian be in the hood too. They know her.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They know Vivian.
Yeah.
So I want to end with that idea of wisdom, and I really appreciate Yvonne bringing that up. Vivian and Andre, would you give us a bit of your wisdom of what you learned over the years? Vivian, can I start with you in this space?
Yes, one thing that I learned from my journey, I call it the 3 Ps. You need a posse, you need persistence, and you need prayer. And when I was in the hospital, I had my family, my mom, my sorority sisters, making sure that they were advocating for me in the hospital. Don't go to the doctor by yourself. Take someone that you trust, because, if the doctor is going to deliver bad news, your mind can't help, your mind can't take it. And so, you may not be, you don't know how you react to that, but somebody that's trusted can write down things and make sure you get the information that you need. Persistence, I needed persistence when I was going through therapy. I had to do physical therapy, I had to do occupational therapy, learning how to live again. And I had to do speech therapy, of course, because that is the activity that was most impacted. And so I needed persistence, and we need persistence in everything that we do. And then prayer. I'm a faithful person, and there is a God, and God answers prayers. And I had so many people praying for me, my friends on Facebook that I didn't even realize prayed, were saying, I'm praying for you. And so collective prayer is so important. I mean, we've seen that just recently at the football game when the player collapsed, and then everybody just got on their knees and started praying. And that was like a message that was seen worldwide. And so just everybody around the world can pray. And, you may not have a lot of money, you may not have whatever you think you don't have. We can close our eyes and get on our knees. And you don't even have to get on your knees. You can close your eyes and talk to God in any way that you want to go to him, because he is there for you.
Or her. Thank you. Andre, give us, or her. Andre, give us your words of wisdom. If I'm going to say, you can try to top Vivian, but we'll see what you do.
No. We don't compete. We complete. We complete.
Amen.
We don't compete. That's my sister, number one, and I can't top her. If anything, I can protect her and I can encourage her to be her better self. So stop starting trouble, David. What I will say here for me is we need to stop calling people names. And if we're going to put labels on people, let's not call them crazy or retarded or anything. Let's call them challenged, and let's call them overcomers, and let's give them something and give them some hope. Much like the weeds in the garden, the little boys come to the garden as weeds. And if you pluck the weeds from the flowers that are choking the plants and keeping them from growing, when you pull the weeds allow the plants to be released to life again, and they can grow and flourish and become big. But you take the weeds and you put them in a composting bin, and you turn them over and you water them, and that weed turns into good soil. And when the next planting season comes, the weed becomes the good soil that grows the good food that is the healing for everybody again. So the wisest word that I can give to the young men that come to the garden and to anybody, stop throwing away your weeds, recompost it and turn it into good soil in your life. You don't have to stay or be what you once were. You can regrow yourself. You are a seed. Take yourself and start all over again, right where you are, no matter what age, no matter what you've done. God, and I always say go, and go for me, David, means God only. And when I say go big, big is because it's God. You cannot convince me. If you don't even believe, David, I believe enough for you, and that might be why you getting through, because of my belief for you. But I tell you, I tell young people that it is about believing in yourself, because if you don't believe, you're going to receive just what comes. But when you believe, you receive what comes with that. So we have to take the weeds and turn them into good soil, take the bad people and the bad things, much like they did the hogs and the chitlins when they threw them out to the slaves back in the day, and they took it and turned it into soul food for good food. We have to learn how to do that. And then we got to become our own news, our own journalists on the block. We have to go up on the porches and meet our neighbors and see who's in the houses, and we got to get the resources in the house. And if they don't bring them in the house for us, go out in the backyard, plant it, pluck it, plow it, and take it in there yourself. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, I'm gonna drop that mic. Drop it, drop it. Oh my goodness. It's hard to do a takeaway, but I'm gonna try to do a couple of little takeaways that I came up with, because I feel like I've been preached to today, and I always was a believer, but this is just a joy for me just to be here today and to witness your testimonies. But one of the things that you said that resonated is that restorative justice is being seen in the cage all the time. The soil helps men understand the connection of the seed, the sun, and life. They look to the sun and they see God. Looking at points of connections, looking at the emotional, the social, the genetics, location, and our culture, all coming together. And we can really honor ourselves and honor the history that we came from, but also looking deeper to then looking at ourselves as the kings and the bosses that we can be and that we are, and that we can live past 25 and become seniors in our community. We can be role models. We can put the neighbor back into the hood. And soul food is African food. We need to discuss the DNA of our food and what our food is doing in our body, and get to know what foods is healthy, but then to do some healthy makeovers. We need to embrace some of the foods of Africa, the seasonings, the spices, the beauty of some of those foods. And then also, I will never forget the idea of the 3 Ps, the posse, persistence, and prayer. And that posse being that connected, trusted person that can help you to understand and navigate the health system, the persistence to overcome adversity, the therapies to keep you going, and then also the prayer that if you pray, God is listening. And I cannot say enough about taking those weeds and turning it into good soil, and pulling weeds and letting that flower blossom. I'm telling you, this is wonderful. And just to think, food and nutrition can be a huge connector piece to developing the types of sense of belonging and the connections that help people to thrive. So with that, I am just ecstatic about this program and the importance of culture.
It's over. It's over.
We've been talking for almost an hour.
Oh, God.
So I want to do this because I am intentional about the time. both Andre and Vivian. Thank you for coming on today. And let's do this. Let's make this, we'll do a repeat performance, because I think that there are more things to be said. And let me say with this, the idea of that there is wisdom in the community and with the community. And we do need to believe. We have a lot of bad news, but if we think about the things that are the points of light, the places where there is thriving and champions like yourself, there is no holding back where we can go. So on behalf of the Days of Learning and the Back to the Kitchen podcast, I want to thank Andre Lee Ellis, Vivian King, my co-host Yvonne Greer, and come back for us on April the 5th at 1 o'clock. We'll be talking about mental health, our show around mental health. Nicholas Dillon and Joanna Brooks. Until then, thank you, God bless, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Take care.